Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is this week's meals for you. So the very first meal, we are going to get started with a fiery jalapeno popper soup. Now I say fiery because this soup had us wanting to drink some milk. It was so spicy. It was also so delicious. It was like spicy, but it wasn't like we couldn't necessarily handle it spicy, but it was just, you were craving some milk with it. So what we're going to do to get started is I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees and I'm just taking 2 packages of bacon here. When I'm making bacon, I like to always make more than I actually need in the recipe. So I used 2 packages here. So once the bacon was cooked, I just took some of that bacon grease. I probably took about 2 tablespoons of that bacon grease and I just came in and added some jalapenos. Now the recipe calls for 4 to 6 jalapenos chopped. Now I used some frozen jalapenos, so it was seeds and all, and I think that's maybe where the heat came from, was because I just dumped in probably half a cup of chopped jalapenos and seeds, so it was pretty intense. And then it also suggests using half a cup of chopped red or green bell pepper. I was using frozen stuff here, so probably used about half a cup of just the frozen stuff, and I'm just getting it sauteed together. And I noticed that it wasn't as liquidy as I needed it to, so I just came in and added a little bit more bacon grease to that. It also says to use half a cup of a chopped white onion in this. We don't really like the onion, so we leave it out. I came in and added about 1 to 2 cloves of garlic and then a 1/4 teaspoon of paprika. Actually, I think I used half a teaspoon of a smoked paprika, and then 1 teaspoon of cumin and 1 teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper. Stir that together, and then you are going to add in 1/4 cup of a all-purpose flour. So you're just trying to get that thickened. That's why I also came in and added a touch bit more of the bacon grease, because I just wanted to have it mix with the flour. And then you are going to add 4 cups of a chicken broth. I added a little bit over 4 cups because I just knew that this was going to be spicy, so I just kind of wanted to make it a little bit larger than it was. And then you're going to add 8 ounces of a cream cheese cut into cubes. I definitely recommend cutting it into cubes because it was just not melting for me. It just was kept staying in the clumps, and I was having to stir it for a really long time because I did not cut it into cubes. So definitely, if you're making this, put it into the small cubes. It will melt way quicker. So the original recipe actually calls to add in 2 cups of a shredded chicken. I did not want to use chicken in this because we actually had chicken Taquitos the night before, so I just really kind of wasn't craving chicken in this. So I made a whole bunch of pre-made cooked sausage in my freezer cooker video, and so I decided to use 2 pounds of the mild sausage in this. I went with mild because, again, we were making a jalapeno soup, so there was no way I wanted to use a hot sausage on top of all of the jalapeno. So I just stirred in the frozen sausage and just stirred that around until it was all good incorporated. I came in and added another pint of chicken stock to this because it was just trying to make a really big batch of it. And then you're going to add in some of that cooked bacon. So I used probably about 6 bacon strips in this, and I just cut it into smaller pieces. And then you want to come in and add 1 cup of half and half to this. I think I actually ended up using a full fat cream in this just because I wanted it really creamy. Came back in, added a little bit more salt and pepper to taste, and then you're just going to cook this for about 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes it's done. Ladle it into your soup bowl and have some bread with it and milk. I keep saying milk because milk is really good to have if you are having really spicy food. It helps cut the edge, but there's the soup. Really delicious. For the next meal, we are going to make some chicken taquitos. I'm probably not saying that correctly. I will leave it down below so you know what I'm trying to say. But we are going to use some canned chicken in this. Canned chicken has been coming to my rescue lately. I only have a couple of chicken breasts left in my freezer, and those have to last me until we process our chickens in June. And I think it's actually the end of June. So we have a really long time before we get our more chicken in into the freezer. So I am using canned chicken. It works perfect in this recipe. When I can my chicken, I just take the already cooked chicken. It's usually a whole bird, and I just shred it up and can it that way. And I think I have about 7 cans on my shelf, and I really like the taste of them. I don't find it tastes off, and it is a perfect substitution for just a chicken breast in this recipe. So we are going to take some of our canned chicken. You can use rotisserie chicken in this as well. It would work perfect. Now I found a recipe online, and I am going to very loosely use this recipe. I tend to go away from recipes a little bit. I told Steven what was in this recipe, and he wasn't a fan of some of the ingredients. But like I said, I'll leave that linked below for you guys if you do want to follow it kind of more accurate to what it suggests to do. So what we did was we took our canned chicken, just drained it out, then I just shredded it a little bit more because there was some bigger clumps in there. Took some cheese. I'm using a smoked cheddar cheese and just got that shredded up. I like to pre-shred my cheese just so that I have it in the fridge, and when I need a really quick meal, I don't have to worry about shredding it. So I shredded a lot more than I actually needed for this recipe. For the seasoning in this, we are going to add 1 teaspoon of a chili powder. Now I am using a medium chili powder, so it does have a little bit of heat to it. I'm also going to come in and add 1 teaspoon of a cumin and 1 teaspoon of a garlic powder, and then 4 ounces of a softened cream cheese. And I'm just going to stir that until it is all combined. Now you're going to take a tortilla. I would strongly recommend using smaller tortillas than this. These are some homemade tortillas that I made, and they're huge. And I've left the recipe below for you guys for the tortillas because they are delicious. Definitely going to be making my tortillas from now on because they're so easy to make. But in this particular recipe, these were just way too big. Steven's like, this is not a Tosquito. He's like, this is a burrito. And I said, nope, this is what the recipe's calling it, so this is what we're going to call it. But definitely use smaller wraps in this than these huge ones. They were still good, but it was just like a jumbo size one. You're going to add about a 1/4 cup of that filling into each of these tortillas. After that, you're going to take a little bit of oil and just lightly brush the top of these, and you are going to bake them in a 425-degree oven for about 15 minutes. So when I took them out, I was just checking to make sure that the top was hardened and like crispy, because that's how I think of a Tosquito, is just kind of crunchy. So because these were huge, we only really needed about 2 per serving. Steven's like, I normally like throw down like maybe 6 at a time, but these were ginormous. So 2 were really filling. So we just put a little bit of salsa on them, had some sour cream on the side, and hot sauce just to make it a little bit more spicy. But these were delicious, and these were actually really awesome because they are really good to go into the freezer as well. So if you want to make a little bit for a freezer meal, these ones worked perfect. For our next meal, we are going to make a ham and cheese pocket. I got this recipe from one of my favorite cookbooks, the Prairie Homestead cookbook. I have left the cookbook linked below for you. I tried to find this recipe online, and unfortunately it is nowhere to be found online, so you would have to reference the cookbook for this. And because it is not my personal recipe, I am going to just refer you guys to that. I cannot recommend this cookbook enough. If you really like to make things from scratch, this cookbook is a really good one to kind of have in your collection. So to get started, we are going to make some buns. So I took a 1/4 cup or half a stick of butter. It does suggest unsalted, but I just used regular butter. I'm also going to add half a cup of whole milk and a 1/4 cup of sugar to this butter, and I'm gonna get it melted. In the bowl of my stand mixer, I took 2 1/4 teaspoon of a dry yeast. Now it does say to use an active dry yeast, and half a cup of warm water, and you're just gonna let that sit until it gets nice and foamy. Usually it takes about 5 minutes. So then you're gonna get this butter melted, and you are gonna cool that butter for 5 minutes. You don't wanna add this hot butter to your yeast mixture. It will kill the yeast. So that's why I started with melting the butter. So I also took 1 egg, just put it in a small bowl, lightly beat that up, and then put that aside. So once your butter is cooled, usually about 5 minutes, you're gonna take that and you're gonna pour that into your dissolved yeast mixture. Then you're gonna take that 1 beat beat an egg, and then add flour half a cup at a time. So the overall recipe recommends 3.5 to 4 cups of an all-purpose flour. Mine probably, if I'm trying to remember how much I used, I think I ended up using about 4 cups in total. And so you're just going to put the dough hook on. If you're using your stand mixer, it does say that you can do this by hand as well, but it does say that it's a little bit easier with the stand mixer, which I definitely agree. So you're going to knead this for about 6 to 8 minutes until the dough is smooth and elastic. I was also coming in and scraping down the sides just to make sure that everything was getting well and incorporated. So you want to take another large bowl and just want to lightly oil that other bowl. And then you're going to take your dough mixture and you are going to put it in the bowl. Just make sure that the dough is covered with the oil, just a little bit, not too much oil. And then you're going to cover it and let it rise in a warm place for about 1 hour. Depending on how cold your house is, it can take a little bit longer than 1 hour. While that is rising, you want to have your oven preheated at 400 degrees. Once it is risen and doubled in size, what you want to do is punch down the dough and divide it into half. And then with those halves, you are going to divide each half into 4 equal size balls. I'm not very exact with it. I just really eyeball it. And it says on a floured surface, roll each ball into a 7-inch round. And then once you get it kind of about to 7 inches, again, I wasn't very exact. I was just making sure that it wasn't too thick of a dough. We're gonna do an egg wash on these, so I was just kind of stopped for a minute and got my egg beaten up there and just set aside so that I had it available when I needed it. So we are gonna do a ham and cheese pocket for this. You can do anything you like, and in fact, I do a couple of different other things than ham and cheese. So I took about 1/3 cup of a chopped ham and then about 1/3 cup of a smoked cheddar cheese, and you're just gonna fold this up and just crimp the sides of this and then get it put onto a baking sheet and just kind of let it sit while you assemble all of your other ones. So some other ones that I decided to do was a smoked cheddar, spinach, and a little bit of bacon. That one was really, really delicious. It was probably my more favorite one out of them all. For this other one, I did a little bit of pepperoni and again, some smoked cheddar in there. Once you get them all assembled, you're gonna come in with your egg wash and just lightly brush the egg wash over top of them, and you're gonna cook them for about 15 to 20 minutes until they're nice and golden brown. While I was cooking these, I kind of made the assumption that these were gonna be really dried out, so I wanted to make like a dipping sauce to go with it. So in the same cookbook, I found a ranch dressing mix. This one is super easy. You don't need any pre-seasoning packets. It comes together really, really well. So you're gonna take 1 cup of a sour cream, and the recipe recommended to use half a cup of buttermilk. I didn't have buttermilk, so I just use a regular whole milk. I definitely would not use half a cup. Half a cup is really good if you're making like a salad dressing and you want it runny, but because it was going for a dip, I probably should have used about a 1/4 cup in there. Then you're gonna come in and add 1 tablespoon of dried parsley, 1 tablespoon of dried dill, and then 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and then 1/8 teaspoon of a ground black pepper. You just want to stir this together. Now, she recommended leaving this in the fridge to sit for about an hour. After the hour, it does thicken up just a little bit, but this was still, you can see here by me stirring it, it was so runny. It was like a salad dressing runny. So definitely recommend using that 1/4 cup if you're looking for like a dippable ranch, but it was really, really good. Even without letting it sit for an hour, because I didn't think about it ahead of time, it was just perfect. So this is what they look like coming out of the oven. So amazing. Like really, really amazing. It was just a delicious, delicious recipe. Definitely recommend this. And the other positive thing, it seems like all my things I was doing, this is another recipe that will do really well in the freezer, and she does give you the directions to that in the cookbook. For the next meal, we are gonna make one of my all-time favorite side dishes. We're gonna make a jalapeno cheddar cornbread waffle. They're so good. I have shown you guys how to make this before, but it was, I believe, almost a year ago, and this recipe is so worthy of resharing it again for all of you new subscribers, because It's amazing. So to get started, we're just gonna make some just plain drumsticks. I just took 6 of our drumsticks, just took the skins off of them, and then I took a jar of my home canned Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. It's a copycat version that I have of it. I have a video showing you guys how I canned it up, and I will leave that linked for you if you're interested in giving it a try. We're gonna cover them up and put them in a 375-degree oven for approximately 45 minutes. So to get started on the best part of the meal, we're gonna get our waffles started. The recipe calls for an 8.5-ounce box of a corn muffin mix, or like a jiffy mix. I make my own, and again, I can leave that linked for you guys as well. It's really easy to make. I make it gallon-sized jar at a time because we go through it very, very quickly. So I'm gonna use about 1.5 cups of my homemade jiffy mix. To that, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of just a regular sugar, white sugar, 2/3 cup of milk. I'm just using whole milk in this. 2 tablespoons of a melted butter. I used salted butter, but you could probably get away with using unsalted, and 1 egg. So you just want to whisk that all until it is combined and everything is good and mixed together. Next, you want to come in and add 1 jalapeno seeded and diced. I have this huge bag of frozen jalapenos from last year's garden that I am very slowly trying to work through. So I just added a little bit of that in there, and then you're going to add 1 cup of a shredded cheese. I just used a smoked cheddar, and then I took a pint of my home canned corn and just drained it and rinsed it really well and added that in. It says that you can also use 1 cup of frozen corn. Just make sure it is defrosted if you're using it, and then you just want to lightly stir that in. Now you can make these into muffins, but I love to do them as a waffle because it's so good. This would be really good with fried chicken as well, for a delicious version of like a chicken and waffles. So we're doing the waffles tonight, so we need to get our waffle maker preheated. Once it's preheated, I just take a little bit of butter. Now with this particular waffle maker, you cannot use cooking spray on it. In fact, most waffle makers you can't. What happens is the cooking spray causes a film to build up on the waffle maker, which eventually will ruin the waffle maker. So whenever doing this, use butter on it. So I took about 1/3, actually it's probably more than 1/3 cup, probably about 1/2 cup of the mixture, and just put it into the hot waffle maker, let it do its thing. It cooked until it beeped that it was ready, and that's what they look like coming out. So this particular recipe makes 3 of those size waffles. This is a very large waffle maker, so they turn out really, really huge. So again, only 3 of them, but 1 serving size is almost just half of the waffle. Like 1 waffle is good for me and Steven, but it's really good for leftovers. So the chicken was ready in about 45 minutes. I just took it out of the oven and just checked the internal temperature just to make sure it was at 165. I actually decided to put the chicken back into the oven because I wanted to throw it under the broiler for a couple of minutes just to kind of get some of that barbecue sauce caramelized. So I put the broiler on to high and put it back in the oven for about, it probably was in there for about 5 minutes. I had purchased some kale from the farmer's market last weekend, so it needed to get used up. One way I love making kale is just put a little butter and oil in a skillet, get that nice and hot, and then add the kale and just saute it until it's nice and wilted, add a little bit of salt and pepper, and it just tastes amazing. So this was the final meal. This was really, really good. This meal turned out great for just really looking in my fridge and just throwing things together. Highly recommend this waffle recipe. I will leave it printed out for you guys in the video description. For the last meal, we're gonna make something that I was craving, and I didn't quite know exactly what it was, but I decided I was gonna experiment and try to make like a potato nacho bowl. It turned out really, really good. So what we're doing to start with this recipe is we're gonna take 2 quarts of my canned potatoes, and I just like to drain them and rinse them really, really well. I find that just by rinsing the canned potatoes, it does take that starchy taste off of them. And next I'm gonna cut them up into more bite-sized pieces. They're still pretty big, but we're just gonna cut them up into smaller pieces. When I can my potatoes, I can them in really, really big chunks. It makes it so much easier for the canning process. So I have my oven preheated at 450 degrees, and once I have them all cut into pieces that the sizes that I want, I'm just gonna add a little bit of olive oil to it. I probably added about 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and then I'm just gonna come in and add about 2 tablespoons, maybe 3 tablespoons of my all-purpose seasoning blend. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees and I'm just gonna cook those potatoes for about 30 minutes. Depending on how crispy you want them, you're gonna vary your time. Next up, I am going to make my own chorizo seasoning. I was really craving like the chorizo taste with these nachos, so I found a recipe online just to make my own because I don't have any chorizo flavored meat. This really is a really good seasoning recipe. So what you need in order to make this is 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of oregano, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of ground cumin, 2 teaspoons of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and half a teaspoon of ground coriander. And you're just going to mix that together and set it aside. The meat I decided to use with this was some ground turkey. So you can make any meat and make it a chorizo with this seasoning. It's really good. The one thing though that I want to note about the chorizo seasoning is there was no spice to it. And when I think of chorizo, I think that there's a little bit of spice there. So next time I make this, I'm actually going to probably come in and add maybe about a teaspoon of red pepper flakes, maybe even 2 teaspoons, just to kind of make it a spicy chorizo, because this was a mild one. Like there was no spice at all to this. So with this seasoning, you want to use 2 tablespoons of this seasoning mix per 1 pound of meat. So for this particular meal, I was using 1 pound of ground turkey, and then I added the 2 tablespoons of chorizo seasoning, and then I just cooked it until the turkey was completely cooked through. Now I pulled the potatoes out at about 30 minutes and noticed that they weren't as crisp as I wanted them to be, so I put them in for another 10 minutes, and then after that 10 minutes, they came out kind of crispier. They weren't like, I really wanted like a nice crunchy potato, but Steven kind of wanted one more soft. So I met him halfway and took them out after another 10 minutes. So to get our bowls assembled, we are gonna make a layer of potatoes on the bottom of the bowl. And then we're gonna come in and add about a 1/4 cup of some smoked cheddar cheese here. You don't need to use smoked cheddar cheese. You can use whatever cheese you want, and you don't even need to use that measurement. This is just kind of what I liked. And then I'm gonna top that cheese with some of that ground turkey that we made. And then I'm gonna put a little bit more cheese on the top. Now I chose to put this in the microwave for about 30 seconds just to get that cheese nice and melted. After the cheese was melted, I came in and topped it with a little bit of my homemade salsa, some homemade pickled jalapenos, and it was just amazing. This recipe turned out like so delicious. It's definitely on the to make list again. So that is going to be the last meal for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope I give you a little inspiration for your upcoming meals. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.